Oh, hello. This is Tak Chung from Walk with Tak. Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you enjoy this video and would like to receive notifications of my future video postings, please subscribe. As we all know, food is an important part of our life, and cooking for ourselves is critical for our health. However, cooking could be a lot of work, and in the modern food landscape, there are too many temptations of not to cook. Therefore, one of the goals of my YouTube channel is to make cooking fun as well as sustainable. Over the past several years, in order to make cooking fun and sustainable for myself, I developed the FAST cooking system. The word FAST is the 4 attributes of this cooking system. They are flavor chasing, advanced prepping, stir frying, and template-based cooking. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the essence of template-based cooking, why template-based cooking is critical for home cooking to be sustainable. To provide a better explanation of what template-based cooking is, I would like to tell you this story of my training as a laboratory scientist. Many years ago, when I was started as a graduate student, I joined a research laboratory. My advisor was an immunologist, and I'm going to pursue a research project in immunology. I was terrible in research in the beginning. During the first almost 6 months, I tried to perfect a particular technique, and I have a lot of inconsistency. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. I also become very anxious, and every time I go into the lab, I will feel a tremendous amount of stress to the point I really do not want to go to the lab anymore. My professor decided that to send me to work with a postdoctoral fellow who just received his PhD about maybe a year ago. He was very much a legend in the building because he is absolutely excellent with his laboratory skill. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to call him Brian. The technique that I have a lot of difficulty and challenge with is a technique for purification of proteins known as gel chromatography. Brian used this technique a lot in his research as well, so it is perfect for him to show me how to do it right. I still remember the first meeting that I had with Brian. He told me that he said, when you come to a technique, you must remember that 10% of this technique is absolutely critical, but the other 90% are not as important, and if you focus on all of them, you're going to wear yourself out. He then told me that the important thing is that for you to figure out what is that 10% is critical. In the beginning, I was not sure what Brian was talking about, but for the next 3 months, by just following Brian and watch how he does things, I start to realize that what he means. Now I recognize that it is absolutely critical in cooking as well. And to me, then it becomes the template-based cooking. A template basically is to identify the critical step in the template that you must pay full attention to. So for this video, I find that there's no better way for me to explain the template-based cooking in baking bread. You're probably all familiar that when people talking about baking is that the measurement has to be exact in order to get it right. At the back of my mind, I can hear Brian was talking to me, and he would say to me, remember, 10% of what you do is absolutely critical. You must pay attention to it. But the other 90% is not so. And it is where you can make adjustments that allow you to help improve the process. So when I first start to bake bread, I start to look at the recipes, and I look at many different recipes, and I realize that there are quite a bit variations between different recipes. However, I discovered that there are a common thread that link all those recipes together. As Brian taught me in my laboratory research is that if you look at a technique that many different people perform the same technique, probably slightly differently, but there's some aspects of that technique everybody will do exactly the same. He said that is where it is the critical step that you must observe and pay attention to, and you must perfect your skill in manipulating those steps. So I'm going to use an example of some bread that I baked recently to demonstrate my point. Now again, my bread baking is based on a template, and so because of the flexibility of the templates, in here you can see I bake two kinds of bread. I basically use the same dough. One is a loaf of bread in a pan. Another one, I actually bake it in a wok. The loaf of bread is just plain bread, but the one that I bake in the wok, I actually added cranberry as well as walnut. They did not come out exactly the same, but they were very close. So over the years, the bread that I bake, which my intention is that for it to have a nice crust, but the crumb is relatively soft. So first, let me tell you what are the critical steps in this template. Number one, in order for this bread to have the type of texture that I prefer, I need to use bread flour due to its higher gluten content. Of course, all-purpose flour will work as well, but it will not come out the way I like them. The second critical component or step is the yeast. The yeast has to be active, so I want to make sure that my yeast is in good condition. Number three is that in order for the bread to rise to the level that I would like it to be, I need to add more protein to the bread. So I add eggs to the dough. The final component is probably the most critical component in terms of the texture of the bread. That is the consistency of the dough. So as you can tell here that I only measure the flour to the extent of how much bread that I want to make. So it doesn't have to be exact at all. I add some salt to the bread. Again, the exact amount of salt is not important. And I actually vary it from time to time, depending on how I like it. Furthermore, the amount of yeast is also not important. I vary it from time to time. If the yeast has been in the refrigerator for a while, I will add a little bit more because I expect them to be less active. Sometimes I add some sugar to the flour and mixture. Again, it depends. Sometimes I add more or less because this is not a critical step at all. So the next step is to add the liquid to the flour mixture. Now I put the eggs directly in some hot water come from the tap because that will get the yeast going a little bit faster. Now you notice that I mix in the egg water to the flour with not an exact quantity, but judged by mainly what time of moisture that I wanted to achieve. So over the past, I have the experiences that I just want to make sure that the flour has a somewhat wet consistency, that not too much dry flour at the bottom of the mixing bowl. I used to mix the dough by hand, which you definitely can do that. But fortunately that my wife gave me a mixer for Christmas that has been a great help. Now this comes that critical step is to how to make the dough consistency right. Because if it's too wet, it will not rise properly. And if it is too dense or too dry, it probably won't rise much at all. So this is a trick that I learned from watching other people's approach doing this. When you knit it by hand, I noticed that people will constantly add flours or sometimes even add fluid to the dough. And while they knit it, they want to make sure that it will achieve the consistency that they were looking for. So in this case, you probably notice that I will add flour to the mixing bowl because I usually try to make it a little bit more wet. So in this case, instead of adding water, adding flour is much easier. You notice that the dough initially sticks to the side of the mixing bowl, but as I add more flour, the dough starts to lift away from the bowl. This is truly the critical step to make sure the bread to turn out correctly. The perfect dough is that the dough is dry enough that it will form together, but it will wet enough still that will pick up everything on the side of the bowl. Well, it actually turned out pretty good because you notice that the side of the bowl is almost completely clean. In fact, the dough actually cleaned the bowl for me. As you can see here, both the bread loaf as well as the bread that baked in the wok turned out quite well. My wife likes plain bread, but the bread with cranberry and walnut, I cut it up into 4 quarters and I kept one and gave the rest away. Now this video is not intended to be a instructional video of how to bake bread, but more of an idea of template-based cooking and how it could apply to all kinds of cooking. Of course, in my case, when I was learning research techniques in the laboratory. Thank you for watching. If you would like to receive notification of my future video postings, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll see you next time.